So, when I was 23 and freshly divorced, I decided to prove to myself I didn't need anyone by doing everything alone. That included hiking. I picked a 3-day trail in an Oregon national park that ended at a remote lake, 8 miles from the nearest parking lot. No cell service, midweek, quiet. I reached the lake in early afternoon and clocked a tent already set up near the tree line. A couple in their mid-20s by a small fire, gear neat, everything too tidy. I called out a friendly, "Hey," and they barely looked up. The guy and the girl traded a fast glance, like a flinch, and my stomach did that thing. Hard to explain, but you know when your brain tags something as not right? I told myself they were just private or fighting or whatever, but I kept my pack on a minute longer than usual and did a slow scan of the shore. Fire ring, bare hang rope, the spring bubbling 50 meters off, and a narrow game trail hugging the lake's far side. I tried again, asked about fishing, weather, anything to break the ice, and the guy finally stood. He asked if I'd been circling their campsite for the past 2 hours. I said no. I'd literally just hit the clearing, and he looked over my shoulder like he expected someone else to appear. They explained, fast, overlapping, that someone in dark clothing kept showing up between the trees and then melting back when they moved. The girls said they'd heard branches snap right behind their tent, like right there, and when they checked, nothing. Her hands shook when she talked. I offered to set up a bit away, and we could get water together from the spring. They agreed quickly, too quick, and the girl kept glancing at the slope above us like she'd already mapped out every tree. Walking to the spring, they whispered. The guy asked if I'd seen anyone on the trail. I hadn't. The girl jumped at a woodpecker and apologized like 10 times. I started wondering if they were just spun up on caffeine or something stronger, but the facts, if true, were specific. Same figure, same distance, never closer than the trees. We split up around 8, them going quiet in their tent, and me in mine, close enough to see their fire through the mesh if I angled my light. I tried to read by flashlight, and the words kept drifting because I was counting sounds. Water, my stove clicking cool, wind sometimes, then screaming. Not like an animal, like human panic. 2 voices, one higher, one hoarse. I grabbed my knife and bolted, boots half laced, and they were outside their tent, throwing gear into packs, full on shaking. The girl said someone cut their tent while they slept. I expected a rip at a seam from a snag, but this was a clean vertical slash on the side wall, like someone pulled a razor straight down. No fraying, no zigzag, just a line you'd make if you were careful. The guy kept saying, we heard it right here," tapping the rip with a knuckle. They were bailing, like right then. I told them hiking out in the dark wasn't smart. Rocks, roots, water crossings. And he said, "It's not smart to stay." He wasn't wrong. The girl said, "Please don't stay." And she said it like she knew me, like she already pictured me alone here and couldn't stand it. I asked if they wanted to wait till first light and we'd all go together. The guy shook his head. He said the figure had stood by the trees watching their fire. Twice. No closer. No voice. Just watching. "If it was you," he said, and left the rest hanging. I told them again I'd just arrived. He nodded like he heard me and didn't believe me. Headlamps on, they shouldered packs, and he told me there was a bend 2 miles down where the trail hits a fork. If I changed my mind, I'd catch their lights there. They warned me it wasn't safe to stay alone. Then they started down the trail, lamps bobbing, small white moons sliding into the timber. I stood there for a minute that felt like 10, then doused my light and listened. Nothing but their footsteps fading. I walked the slash with my fingers, careful not to widen it, and checked the ground around their tent. Boot prints everywhere, a mess. One set smaller than mine, one larger, hard to tell direction in the trample. I told myself if someone cut it, they'd still be around to watch the reaction. Creeps do that, right? So I circled the immediate tree line, slow and steady, keeping the fire at my back. No eye shine, no movement, no cough in the dark. When I came back, I put another log on, set my knife on my knee, and sat. I'm not brave. I was just making a decision the way you pick the least bad option. Hiking out alone in pitch black over wet roots wasn't smart, and staying with a fire and a blade and no one knowing I was out here also wasn't smart. I figured if someone wanted to mess with me, the light put me on my terms. I poured a little water to hear the sizzle on the pan. I know, dumb, but the noise felt like a tripwire. And I kept the headlamp off because the beam makes you blind to the edges. Every few minutes I'd sweep the trees with a quick tilt of the flashlight, short burst, then off again, so I wouldn't paint my position for too long. I tried to think like a normal person, like maybe a bored hunter, maybe some idiot from a fire road messing around. But the cut in that tent wasn't a joke cut. It said, "I can get to you." The longer I sat, the more obvious it got that the forest around me was completely silent, which somehow felt worse than hearing noises. Then I heard rustling in the bushes behind my tent. I didn't wait to investigate. I grabbed my backpack with essentials, wallet, keys, water, headlamp batteries, the small first aid kit, left everything else, and stepped onto the trail. I kept the beam low so I wouldn't blind myself, and walked fast but careful, telling myself not to run. Every crack of a twig made me spin around, which felt dumb but automatic, and I kept thinking how easy it would be to fall and hand myself to whoever had time to make a clean cut in a tent wall. After about 30 minutes, I caught up with the couple at a trail junction. Their lamps bounced while they argued like the volume helped. He pointed left and said it went to the road. She said right was quicker because she remembered a switchback. Neither of them had a map, not paper, not downloaded. I said the lot was the lower route because I'd heard water that way, and remembered stepping over a downed log near a blaze. They looked at each other. Then he said, "Fine. Lower path." Like a bet he didn't want to talk about. We moved together after that, single file, me in the middle, and kept our beams off each other's backs so we weren't making jumpy shadows. At a narrow bridge, she hesitated and said she left her mess kit, and he told her to let it go. I said leaving gear was triage. When the trail dipped toward a little ravine, the dirt got slick, and we slid more than once. Somewhere behind us, something cracked, far enough we couldn't place it, and we didn't stop to analyze. We just kept moving, and he checked his watch every few minutes. Eventually the tread straightened and widened, then gravel started crunching under us, and we were in the lot. It was around 2 a.m. from what my dash clock said when I hit unlock, and the space where their car had been was empty. He said the other person must have driven out earlier if they got spooked worse than us, and I didn't argue because it was the easiest explanation. I told them good luck, got in my car, locked the doors, started the engine, and pulled out. I didn't look back. When the sun came up, I called the ranger office and explained everything step by step, gave them the exact lake, where the spring sits, how the cut looked, and the times as best as I could. They said they'd send a team. Later, they called back. They searched the area and found nothing except the slashed tent. No footprints, no cigarette butts, no food wrappers, no other signs. The campfire was cold. My gear was still there, scattered. I never went back for my gear. The rangers mailed me a list of what they recovered, and I told them to donate it all. What keeps me up is that I never saw anyone, and neither did the couple. Was someone really out there? Or did our fear feed itself until we built a threat that wasn't there and ran from it anyway? I've read about hysteria and how fear spreads between people like a virus. But that cut in their tent was real. I saw a clean line and somebody made it with a knife. Maybe it was them, some prank or a fight turned into a story, though I don't know why they'd risk hiking out in the dark for that. Or maybe something I didn't see was hunting us that night, careful, and we were lucky to leave when we did. In September last year, I took my two kids, Emily, who's 10, and Logan, who's 14, to see this new animated movie they'd been begging me about. It was a Wednesday night, around 8 p.m. when we came out of the theater at this small shopping complex on the edge of town. The parking lot was half empty, just scattered cars and those dim streetlights that leave gaps of darkness between bright spots. We were heading to our silver Toyota in a middle row, when I noticed a woman about 40 walking parallel to us, maybe 30 feet to our right. She had a phone to her ear and was talking way too loud, but the words were chopped up and weird, like phrases from 3 different conversations. It sounded like nothing that didn't add up, and she kept glancing over mid-sentence. I told myself it was nothing. People perform into phones. But as Logan replayed a joke from the movie, I realized the woman wasn't staying parallel anymore. Every dozen steps she shaved a little space, nothing dramatic, just a drift. Emily asked for hot chocolate. I told her we'd do cocoa at home. Keep moving. The woman's voice kept spilling nonsense. Yeah, blue box, back gate, 10. But her eyes were on us, not her path. It felt like when someone pretends to dial just to look busy while they watch you. I sped up. The car chirped and I opened the back door and got both kids inside fast. Seatbelts. Now Logan. What's up? Me. Seatbelt. The woman stopped maybe 10 feet away and watched, hands sunk in her jacket pockets. I slid into the driver's seat and hit lock, heart thumping more from instinct than anything I could name. She didn't speak. She just lifted her chin like she wanted me to read her mouth. Then she turned and headed to an old white van 3 cars down. No side windows, matte paint. She didn't open the door. She just stood at the driver's side and stared back at our car. I started the engine and left it in park. Emily. Why aren't we leaving? Me. 1 second. I scanned for people. One couple by the ticket kiosk. A teen dropping popcorn bags in the curbside trash. No security. Theater doors closing behind us. If I pulled forward and turned right, we'd have to pass within a few feet of her. Something about the geometry made my stomach go tight, like I'd be giving her the chance to step in. Now, before I explain what I did next, you need to understand, I'm a single mom, and guessing wrong with 2 kids strapped in isn't an option. My ex, Daryl, and I co-parent without drama. He lives about 15 minutes from there, and he's steady under pressure, so I called him while watching the mirror. He picked up on the second ring. Everything okay? He said. I told him fast. The fake call, the turn toward us, her shifting to the van, and then just standing there, watching. Doors locked? He asked. Locked, I said. He got quiet for a beat. Has she come back toward you? No, I said, just staring. I could hear drawers and a door in the background. He was putting on shoes, and Logan leaned between the seats. Want me to record? No. Sit back. Doors stay locked. The woman adjusted her stance by the van. I couldn't see a front plate. If there was one, it was caked in grime. Mom? Emily whispered. We're okay, I told her. Eyes on the mirrors, engine idling, buying time on purpose and trying not to advertise panic anyway. Where are you parked? Daryl asked. I described the row, the lane ahead, and that she'd be on my side if I pulled forward. Anybody close enough to help? A couple by the kiosk and a kid by the trash. He exhaled. All right, stay put. Do not roll a window down. Do not drive past her yet. If there's someone sitting low in that van you can't see, you don't want to get boxed in. I heard keys. Keep the engine running, doors locked. If she leaves before I get there, get me proof. Then he said photograph the van's license plate and don't leave until she does. I turned on my high beams, flooding the white van with bright light. Took several clear photos of the license plate, the van itself, and the woman who threw her arm up over her face to block the light. Got a good shot of her too. After maybe 20 seconds of being spotlighted, she finally climbed into the van. The engine started, she backed out slowly, and drove toward the parking lot exit onto the main road. I waited another full minute, making sure she was actually gone and not just circling around. The couple by the kiosk had gone inside. The kid at the trash was gone too, and the only movement was our own headlights bouncing off empty windshields. Then I pulled out and went the opposite direction from where she'd turned. No sudden moves, just steady and obvious. Logan kept asking if we were okay, and I said yes. Keep your belt on, eyes up, we're good. My hands were shaking on the wheel the whole drive home. When we got to my place, I told Daryl everything, every detail of her voice and the way she stood, and he said, "You need to file a report tonight if you can." But it was late, and the kids were wiped, so he said first thing in the morning, and he meant it. He also told me to back up the photos to his phone and my email, just in case, so we did that before the kids brushed their teeth. He checked the doors and stayed until the kids were asleep. "You did the right thing," he said, and he wasn't saying it to make me feel better. He meant it like a checklist. Next day I went to the station and showed them the photos. The detective I spoke with looked at them for a long time, then asked me to describe exactly what happened. I went step by step from the theater doors to the car, where she was when I noticed her, the fake loud phone talk, the part where she cut in toward us, how close she got, and how she stood by the van without getting in. He asked about the lights, where the shadows fell along our row, whether anyone else interacted with her, and if I'd heard anything from the van itself, any voices, any thump or slide. I told him no, just her, and the van sitting like dead weight. He asked about the plate, whether it was bent or dirty, and I told him it was readable and I'd shot it twice. He took my phone, copied the images to their system, and wrote the times down off the metadata. When I finished, he leaned back and told me something that made my stomach drop. There'd been multiple attempted child abductions in our area over the past month, kids 9 to 12, and witnesses had described a woman matching her appearance. A white van with no windows had come up in at least 2 of those reports. All in big parking lots, he said, quick moves at the back doors, parents busy with bags or tickets or seat belts. He asked if I'd be willing to come in for a possible lineup identification if they brought someone in. I said yes, no question. They asked me to come in for a possible lineup identification, but they never caught her. She disappeared after my report. A week went by, then another. I called once to follow up, and the detective said they were still checking tips and pulling cameras from nearby stores, and patrol was told to keep an eye on similar vans, but nothing solid. He also said my photos were the clearest evidence they had, but the plates came back to a vehicle reported stolen 3 weeks earlier, which meant whoever drove that van was swapping tags, taped or screwed on quick, and by the time anyone ran them, they were gone. He told me to keep the kids close, keep doing exactly what I did, lights, photos, calls, and to let them know if I ever saw that van again, even if I wasn't sure it was the same one. I don't take my kids out after dark anymore without another adult with us, and I always park directly under lights near the entrance even if I have to wait for a spot to open up. And I still think about how close we might have been to something terrible. How one wrong turn past that van or one window cracked for a stranger could have turned a normal Wednesday into a missing poster. And if that makes me the mom who circles twice and says no to late shows, then fine, because that's the trade I'll make every time. When I tried to leave the apartment after delivering the order, the door wouldn't open, and my customer was standing between me and the exit with a kitchen knife in her hand. I'll never forget the sound of that deadbolt clicking behind me, or the way her expression changed from polite to cold in seconds. But let me back up to how I ended up in that apartment in the first place. I'd been working as a delivery cyclist for 8 months after my design studio went under, pedaling through the city with a thermal bag strapped to my back. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me moving. That night started like any other Tuesday around 9 p.m., just another delivery ping on my phone. Sushi order, $60, prepaid by card, address in a quiet residential neighborhood. I grabbed the thermal bag, clipped on my body camera, company requirement after a series of robberies, and headed out. Nothing about the order seemed off, except maybe that the customer didn't answer the intercom when I buzzed. I should add, this complex had one of those quiet, carpeted hallways where sound gets swallowed up, and it was weirdly still as I walked up to the 3rd floor. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand, I have a few rules. Don't go inside, keep the bag close, keep the exit in sight. I followed them because they made sense, and also because this gig is my rent, my food, the last thing standing between me and calling my parents to admit the studio's dead for good. I texted, "Here," waited 30 seconds. Then the door opened a crack. A woman's voice, calm and friendly, said, "Sorry, intercom's busted." She had the order number right. I figured fine, handoff, done. The woman met me at her 3rd floor apartment door, mid-40s, neat bob haircut, expensive-looking loungewear, and a cloud of designer perfume. She smiled warmly and asked me to step inside while she grabbed cash for a tip. I usually didn't go into apartments, but the hallway was narrow, and she seemed respectable enough, so I stepped into the entryway. I set my bag down, waiting while she disappeared into the kitchen, saying something about needing to find small bills. The apartment was clean, modern furniture, framed art on the walls, nothing that screamed danger. I heard her rummaging around in there, drawers opening and closing, muttering to herself. That's when I heard the deadbolt click behind me. I turned and saw she'd come back from the kitchen, but there was no cash in her hands, just an 8-inch knife. I said, "Hey, it's okay. Keep the food. I'm gonna..." And she didn't react at all, just tilted the blade a little like she was measuring distance. My brain did that fast math. Door behind her, phone in my jacket, camera clipped to the strap, legs ready, but the knife screwed up every calculation. I kept my hands where she could see them because I didn't want her thinking I'd try anything. It felt like the air was thinner in there, and I could hear the fridge hum and nothing else. "Backpack, phone, camera, everything on the floor," she said, her voice flat and businesslike, no emotion at all. My hands were shaking as I slowly took off my backpack with the day's cash and my phone, setting them down like she ordered. She stayed about 10 feet back, knife pointed at me, eyes focused and steady. I tried to reason with her, said she could take everything, just let me go. But she didn't respond. She just gestured with the knife toward the far corner of the entryway, and I backed up slowly. The moment I was out of her way, she moved quickly, scooping my stuff into a shopping bag she'd already prepared, never taking her eyes off me or lowering the knife. Then she told me to stay in that corner for 5 more minutes, after which the door would unlock automatically. Before I could respond, she vanished deeper into the apartment. I stood there counting seconds, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. From somewhere in the apartment, I heard footsteps, the rustle of fabric, then a door opening, maybe to a balcony. After 2 minutes that felt like 20, I couldn't take it anymore and crept toward the front door. I kept my palms up and moved slow, 'cause the floor was slick near the threshold, and I didn't want to make noise, and I put my ear to the wood like that would help. Nothing. I grabbed the handle and twisted, locked solid. I tried the chain, the bottom bolt, everything I could reach, all secured from the inside somehow. I checked the keypad by the jamb, and it blinked red like a stupid little eye. Panic set in, and I started banging on the door, yelling for help. "Hello? Hey, I need help!" But the building was silent, just that faint compressor sound from someone's AC, and my voice bouncing back at me. I checked the peephole, empty hallway. I looked for anything I could use, umbrella stand by the wall, metal hook for coats, even the sushi bag where soy sauce had leaked. None of it helped with a lock that didn't belong to me. Then I heard a mechanical click, tiny but clear, and the door handle suddenly gave way. She must have been controlling the lock remotely from another room. I didn't wait to figure out how, just yanked the door open and ran. I flew down the stairs, not trusting the elevator, and burst out onto the street, running until I reached a 24-hour convenience store 2 blocks away. The clerk stared when I came in panting with an empty strap hanging off my shoulder, and I said, "I was robbed with a knife. I need a phone now, please." And he slid his cell across the counter without asking for anything else. I called 911, gave them the address, unit number, my name, company, described what happened and what the woman looked like. Mid-40s, bob haircut, beige set, knife long as my forearm. The dispatcher kept me talking. "Are you injured? Are you in a safe place?" And I said yes and yes, and she told me officers were en route and to stay inside the store. The clerk locked the door and flipped the sign while I stood by the soda fridge trying not to shake apart. 2 patrol cars showed up fast, lights washing the sidewalk, and one officer took me aside and wrote everything while the other radioed up to the building. They asked about the body camera and I told them it records automatically from pickup to drop-off. And yes, the light was on the whole time. And yes, I was sure. I pointed at the 3rd floor window I thought belonged to her unit. They headed in with the property manager they'd reached on a phone tree or whatever system they run at that hour, and I waited by the cruiser with a fleece blanket someone handed me from the trunk. 10 minutes later, the cops came back down shaking their heads, apartment empty. The balcony door was wide open, curtains wedged in the slider, and a metal fire escape sat right there like a ladder truck gift, and she was gone. They asked if she touched me or took anything besides gear, and I said no. She stayed back. She was careful, almost like she'd done this a few times and had practiced the spacing. They took my statement again at the station to be thorough, then dropped me home because my bike was still chained to the rack outside the complex, and they said they'd retrieve it. The next day, detectives called to tell me my body camera had recorded everything, including her face, and they'd identified her from their database. 3 similar robberies using the same method: fake tip talk, remote lock, fire escape exit. I sent over my app logs, and the timestamps matched. They caught her a week later trying to pull the same scam on another delivery driver across town. Knife, shopping bag ready, same perfume. I still do deliveries, but I never step inside anyone's home anymore, no matter how polite they seem or how nice the apartment looks. The school bus was standing vertically between 2 rocks, nose pointing at the sky like someone had just dropped it from orbit. That image is burned into my brain forever. Let me back up. Marissa and I had been running the same route every Saturday morning for like 6 months. The old quarry was our turnaround point, 20 minutes from our neighborhood, totally dead and quiet. We knew every broken tire and beer can in that place. That morning started normal. We were jogging, talking about some drama from school, not paying much attention until we rounded the corner by the west wall. That's when we saw it. A full-size yellow school bus wedged vertically between 2 rock outcrops, rear wheels touching the ground, front end suspended maybe 50 feet up. I stopped so fast Marissa slammed into my back. We both just stood there staring at this thing that made zero sense. The paint looked fresh, not a speck of rust. The windows were intact and clean. There were even license plates still attached. This wasn't some ancient wreck that had been there forever. It looked like it had rolled off the lot yesterday and somehow ended up jammed between rocks in a position that defied physics. No crane marks in the dirt. No tire tracks leading up to it. No evidence of how the hell it got there. Marissa whispered something, but I couldn't hear her over the blood pounding in my ears. I took a few steps closer, trying to understand what I was seeing. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand the quarry. There's one road in under a bent chain-link gate with a dead padlock you can slide aside if you know the trick. Then the lane hugs the west wall into a wide bowl where contractors used to park equipment. Off that bowl, a short switchback climbs the hill. Loose rock, ankle twister, we never take it. The bus was wedged in the choke where two slabs pinched together. If a crane had come through, the roadbed would show it. If something fell from above, there'd be gouges or scatter. There was nothing. Just our footprints behind us and the normal powder over cracked gravel. The bus had Riverside School District printed on the side in crisp letters. Through one of the windows, I could see a kid's jacket hanging on a hook inside. Everything about it screamed normal, except for the fact that it was standing on its ass between two boulders. The ground around it looked undisturbed. Just regular quarry dust and gravel, same as always. No debris field, no broken glass, nothing to suggest violent impact or machinery. I kept outside the shadow of the nose because I'm not stupid. I wasn't going to be the kid flattened by a falling bus. Marissa grabbed my wrist and said my name like a warning, but I edged to the driver's side anyway. Up close, the inspection sticker in the corner of the windshield looked current. The bus number was stenciled neat near the door. The rubber seam around the door wasn't dry or cracked. Inside, between seatbacks, I spotted a loose worksheet, folded, like somebody shoved it in fast. I crouched by the rear wheels and watched the dust. Nothing moved. The tiniest pebbles wore that faint powder glaze we're used to, like no one had even breathed here. "We should go," Marissa said, low, and I said, 2 seconds, because I felt like my brain needed one clean fact to hang this on, or it was gonna just, I don't know, invent stuff. People don't pull off impossible without leaving boring trash behind. Straps, drag marks, oil stains, cigarette butts, something. I scanned the bowl. No chalk lines, no fresh scuffs on the rock, no rope burns on the edges. I kept telling myself, if it's a prank, there's gear. Gear means prints. Prints mean a story. But there wasn't a story. Just the bus and us. I said, "There's no way," and fished my phone out because no adult is going to believe two 17-year-olds who didn't take a picture. My hands were shaking, which annoyed me more than anything. The camera hunted focus on the glass, so I sidestepped until the glare dropped. "That jacket," I said, pointing. It was a kid-size puffer, navy with a reflective stripe, sleeves hanging like it got left in a hurry. Marissa said, "Kate, please." And I said, "I'm not going under it." And I didn't. I stayed wide, shot the plate, the district lettering, the sticker date. I zoomed on the seam where the panels meet because the paint looked too clean, like showroom clean. Still no chips. I checked the road we came in on. Gate closed the same dumb way. No new groove in the dirt, no extra boot prints. If someone hauled this here at night, they were ghosts. And I don't believe in ghosts, so that left people with planning. I took another step sideways, keeping my eyes on the rocks above because if this was somehow suspended, stupid thought I know, I wanted to see the how. That's when I noticed a faint disturbance up the hill where the switchback starts. Not a footprint. more like a ripple across the top layer of dust, the kind that happens when something vibrates nearby. I squinted, and it was there, then not there, like the dust settled back. "Do you see that?" I asked. "What?" Marissa said, and she tugged my sleeve harder. I shut up and listened. The quarry is usually big quiet, like empty gym quiet, sound falling away. This quiet felt tight, like the air conditioner in a school hallway right before it kicks on. Far-off road noise, a crow arguing with itself, our breath. Under that, a thread of sound that didn't match. I raised my hand without thinking, and Marissa stopped moving. We both turned our heads the same way. The bus didn't make a sound. The rocks didn't make a sound. From somewhere up the hill behind the bus, not the gate, not the road we came in on, I heard it. Low mechanical humming coming from somewhere up the hill behind the bus. It wasn't constant. It would build up, then fade, then build again in a rhythm that made my skin crawl, like a generator cycling. Marissa heard it too because she went pale and clamped my arm hard enough to hurt. We didn't say anything. We just turned and ran. Not jogged. Full sprint back the way we came. I barely remember the route out. Powder sliding under our shoes, that corner by the west wall, the lane stretching forever. And nobody talked until houses showed. We didn't stop until we hit Marissa's driveway and collapsed on her front lawn trying to catch our breath. Her mom wasn't home, Saturday grocery run, so we sat by the hose spigot and tried to think like normal people. Explanations. Maybe it was some stunt for a commercial, like they were gonna film later and we beat them there. Maybe a stolen bus, dumped to scare people. Maybe old equipment still up there and the humming was part of it, except the paint was too clean and the inspection sticker wasn't fake. The quarry is in a valley, shielded by trees and the ridge, nowhere near any highway or bridge, and there were no tracks, nothing leading in. Call 911? We both said it at the same time, then both said no, 'cause what do you even report? A bus in a place it can't be and a noise we can't place, and we're two teenagers trespassing. I said we should text my brother who's good with engines. Marissa said wait till tomorrow, go with people, daylight, get proof from more than just us. That felt reasonable. We set 9 a.m., bring water, no hero stuff, just eyes and photos. The next day we went back with two guys from our class, Tyler and Josh. We figured there was safety in numbers and maybe we'd overreacted. They roasted us on the walk-in, asked if the Skybus would autograph their sneakers, but they still held the gate while we slid the chain like always. Sun was higher, no wind. We kept a steady pace and nobody messed around because the jokes sounded thin as we got closer. I pointed out the turn where we first saw it and told them to listen. When we got to the spot where the bus had been, there was nothing. Just the same two rock outcrops with a gap between them like always. No bus. No marks on the rocks where it would have scraped. No oil stains on the ground. The dust lay smooth except for our new footprints, and even those sank shallow. Tyler climbed onto the lower slab and ran his hand along the edge and yelled down that there wasn't even a scuff. Josh laughed and said we probably saw a shadow or the side of a storage container and freaked. Marissa kept quiet. I took photos of nothing because that was all there was. I checked the access lane, the gate, the bowl, every line of sight from yesterday. The chain hung the same way, dust under it untouched. No tire ruts, no drag path, no footprints beyond ours. Tyler asked where the humming was. I said it wasn't here now, and that didn't help. He and Josh started back toward the road, laughing again but faster, like they were done humoring us. Marissa said, flat, that we were not coming back here again, and I agreed. We walked out. We never ran that route again. When I drive past the turnoff, I slow, look. Part of me wants proof I'm not crazy. The rest of me hopes I never do. When I was 26, me and my buddy Adam moved into this apartment in Austin right after our startup got its first funding. We were pumped, finally making decent money, working remote, living the dream. The place was a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a new complex, and we planned to code from home and enjoy our independence. Our downstairs neighbor introduced herself the first week. Cynthia Walker, mid-50s, recently divorced, worked as an office manager at a dental clinic. She seemed nice enough, brought up homemade apple pie, told us about the complex rules, offered to help us get settled. Adam set up her Wi-Fi when she asked. I carried out her trash when she mentioned her back hurt. It all felt normal. But within 3 weeks, Cynthia started appearing everywhere. Elevator, parking lot, laundry room. Always exactly when we were coming or going, and the timing got too perfect to ignore. I kept telling myself Austin's a small world inside a building. But then she'd make tiny comments that didn't fit, like repeating our coffee order even though we never told her, or joking about our 2 a.m. deploys when we'd pushed one late fix and didn't talk to anyone about it. She'd wave a little too long or ask, out of nowhere, if we kept our balcony door locked. "'Cause 3rd floor guys get lazy," she said. Adam shrugged. She's just chatty. But my stomach did that tight thing you get before a bad meeting. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how our floor is laid out. 1 straight hallway off the elevator, 4 doors, ours at the end, hers directly beneath us, stairwell right by her unit. It meant she could hear us hit the elevator button and beat us to the lobby without much effort if she felt like it. The casual encounters turned into constant intrusion. Cynthia knocked with small requests, milk, pictures hung, a weird rattle in her vent that was nothing. We tried to stay polite, but when it became daily, we started dodging. On a call, deadline, sorry, crunch week. That's when she pivoted to complaints. She started emailing property management saying we blasted music, stomped, cooked strong odors that damaged her furniture. We wore headphones, we walked barefoot, we ordered takeout more than we cooked, so none of it tracked. The manager called us in. We showed a week of texts where she'd knocked multiple times a day. He basically said, "Try to get along," which was useless. We left that meeting and bought a Ring doorbell, mounted it to face our threshold and the length of the hall. It didn't take long to pay off. First night, 11:38 p.m. She stood in front of our door for 58 seconds. Not knocking, not moving, just breathing through her nose. The mic caught it. Second night she tried our handle, gentle, like a test, then walked away. We saved the clips to the cloud and an external SSD. 2 days later, another management email, a final warning citing verbal abuse in the stairwell and kicking her door. At the time stamped in the email, we were on back-to-back Zooms, calendar invites to prove it, and the Ring showed we didn't leave until 6:12 p.m. for takeout. We replied with links to the clips and screenshots. No response. So we stopped answering her knocks entirely and moved everything to email. Adam taped a note inside by the door for us. No in-person discussions, call or email management. And we both promised to keep it boring. For a couple days it went quiet, which somehow felt worse, like when a process hangs but doesn't crash. You wait for the error. Then Thursday night happened. Adam was at his girlfriend's and I was home alone working on a hotfix. Hard knock, 3 quick hits. I checked the peephole and saw 2 cops. I opened up. "Evening, sir," one said. "We got a call from Miss Cynthia Walker. She says you threatened her in the hallway and threw a coffee mug at her." I gestured at my pajama shorts, the barefoot thing, the laptop on the island with my repo open, Slack pinging. "I haven't left." "We have a Ring right there," I said, and pulled up the app. We scrubbed back 3 hours. I hadn't stepped outside once. 2 clips did show Cynthia. She approached, hovered, left, then came back and dropped something by our doormat before walking away. I paused it and zoomed. Ceramic shards. She'd staged the mug. The officers watched the clips and traded a look. "Can you email those to us?" the older one asked. I sent them the files and a download link to the previous week. They went downstairs. I called Adam, "You need to come home," and locked the deadbolt even though it was already locked. 10 minutes later, the cops came back up and said they'd warned her about filing false reports. No arrest, no citation, just a warning. "Document everything and call us if it escalates," the older one said, and they left. Adam walked in around 9, still in his jacket, and we sat at the counter with both laptops and started a timeline. Dates, knocks, emails, management calls, the nonsense about smells, every clip name, each with timestamps. We debated moving out, we just signed, a restraining order, we didn't know the process, and whether going scorched earth on management would backfire. We argued a little because stress makes you dumb. He said I was too nice. I said he was too ready to blow it up. But we both wanted the same thing, to not get dragged into some neighbor's mess. Around midnight, we agreed on a plan. We would document everything obsessively and hope management would finally take us seriously. Cynthia didn't stop after the police visit. If anything, she got more creative. She blasted our names in the neighborhood Facebook group about aggressive young men terrorizing an older woman, and strangers we'd never met piled on yelling to call the news. She filed a health department complaint saying we had roaches and a fire marshal tip that we stored accelerants in the hall closet. Inspectors came twice, checked the kitchen, the breaker closet, the balcony. Both visits were clean. She messaged our CTO on LinkedIn calling us unstable. She slid tenant rights printouts under our door like we were a problem. We recorded everything, saved every notice, and hired a lawyer to send a cease and desist that spelled out the harassment and the false report. Cynthia posted the letter and called it intimidation by rich tech bros, which was ridiculous because we were barely covering rent after burn-cut salaries. Adam stopped sleeping and his watch kept buzzing with heart rate alerts. I couldn't work at home because I'd sit waiting for a knock, so I rotated between a coffee shop and a spare desk at the office. She commented about my table once, which meant she was nearby watching. Management finally scheduled a hearing after our lawyer threatened injunctive relief. We printed a binder with ring timestamps, emails, inspection results, the officer's case number. 3 other residents came, an older couple from Building C, a single mom from our floor, and a guy who'd moved out but kept screenshots. Their stories matched ours. Cynthia was warm at first, then invasive, then vindictive when you enforced boundaries. The mom had emails where Cynthia told the school she was concerned for the child, completely fabricated. The ex-tenant had video of her blocking his car. The pattern was obvious to everyone there. Management gave her 30 days to vacate or they'd terminate the lease. She went quiet for a week, then slipped fake HOA violation papers under our door demanding a fee. We sent those to management and got back not from us. 2 days later, she double-parked behind Adam so he couldn't leave for a dentist appointment. Security had to inch her sedan forward. At the mailboxes, she told me she knew people at the city and we'd be done. I said nothing and held my phone up recording. The notice to vacate went up with blue tape that afternoon. Cynthia moved out on day 28 without a word to us. No apology, no acknowledgement. Her last act was leaving a box of broken dishes outside our door with a note that said, "You ruined my life." I took photos, bagged the shards, and emailed management and our lawyer. After the movers left, the hallway stayed quiet. Management offered a free transfer to another unit. We said no, because we weren't letting her run us off. Security changed the building codes. A med student rented her old unit. Quiet guy who nods and minds his business. It was finally quiet. 6 months have passed and I still flinch when someone knocks. And Adam added another camera pointed at the lot because neither of us like surprises now. We never learned what was actually wrong with Cynthia or why she locked on to us. Maybe the divorce broke something. Maybe she always ran this play. It doesn't matter. What I learned is the most dangerous neighbors aren't the loud partiers. It's the ones who smile while building a case against you. The system waits for overwhelming evidence, and by then your peace is gone, and you never relax the same way again. I was working at this big sporting goods store in the mall, in the running shoe department, and it was usually pretty chill. That Thursday around 8, I was helping a couple pick out trekking boots, doing the whole ramp test and lacing tricks, when I clocked a guy around 35 over by the basketball shoes. He wasn't shopping, not really. He was angled just enough to watch us. I gave him the retail nod, like, "I see you, I'll be right there." And he turned away fast and pretended to study a high top. When I finished with the couple and walked them toward the register, the guy was gone. And honestly, I forgot about him because that's a normal night in retail, you know? About 30 minutes later, my personal phone buzzed, which was weird because we're not supposed to have them out on shift unless it's urgent. Unknown local number. I answered thinking it might be family. A man said, very calm, "Those black Nikes look good on you, Madison," and hung up. I just stood there with the phone to my ear because I really was wearing black Nike trainers I'd bought with our employee discount, and the name thing threw me. My badge was flipped around on the lanyard. I looked around the department like which one of my friends thinks they're hilarious, but none of my usual coworkers were even on that night. I told myself it was a friend being dumb and shoved the phone back into my pocket. But that prickly feeling didn't go away. 20 minutes after that, it rang again. Same number. I picked up ready to snap, and the same voice said, "You're ignoring customers, Madison. I've been standing here 5 minutes." I went cold because my aisle had been empty. I hadn't helped anyone in a while. "Who is this?" I asked, but he'd already clicked off. I stood there a second too long with my phone in my hand like an idiot. Then I did something useful. I walked straight to Trent at the main register and told him, showed him the number. He frowned and said, "If it happens again, we'll pull the cameras, but I can't accuse someone without something concrete." "You good to stay on the floor?" I said I was, because stepping off felt worse. Like I'd be walking blind and giving whoever that was exactly what they wanted. He said he'd keep an eye on the front, and he'd call mall security if it escalated. Back in running, I started watching every guy who drifted through. Cap low, hoodie up, new faces, old faces. I tried to match voices in my head and couldn't. The store was open till 10, less than an hour left. I stalked a wall of new models and my hands shook so bad a box slipped and thumped the floor, and I jumped like I'd been caught. At 9:30 the phone rang a third time and I answered on the first buzz. "In half an hour you'll go out the service exit to the employee lot," he said. "I'll be waiting by your blue Honda Civic." My stomach dropped because yeah, I drive a blue Civic. It was on the back lot behind the store, the one you need a badge to access. Not visible from the public side at all. I went straight to Trent, showed him the screen, and before I finished explaining, he was already calling mall security. He told me, "They'll sweep the lot and walk you out, and I'm staying till you're in your car and gone." Those last 30 minutes dragged and popped at the same time. I rang up a dad buying socks and a teenager trying on cleats, and I could hear my voice doing that bright, fake smooth cadence while my brain spun on who actually knew my car. HR had the make and plate on a parking form. A few coworkers had ridden with me. You couldn't see the back lot unless you came through the corridor or knew the loading dock angles. Every time someone stepped into running, I braced, and every time it was a normal customer asking about sizes. I kept checking the clock and catching myself, which probably looked weird, so I made myself fold returns just to have my hands doing something. Closing hit at 10, and the gate chime sounded, and the last shoppers drifted out. The guard actually showed up like they promised. Big guy around 40 with a clipped haircut and a radio on his belt. He said, "You Madison? Okay, we're gonna do a sweep." And Trent told him the details and said again that he was walking with us. We cut through the stockroom and into the service corridor. Bare walls, gray floor, the keypad door that sticks unless you hip check it. And the guard went first with his flashlight up, the beam moving slow, not theatrical, just careful. The employee lot is a rectangle of asphalt, chain link on 2 sides, and the back wall of the mall on the 3rd, with numbered spaces and a permit required sign by the gate. My Civic was where I'd left it, 3rd row near the light pole. The guard raised his hand like wait and gave the whole place another look. He scanned behind the dumpster, between the delivery trucks, the shadow line along the loading dock. Trent stayed a step behind me and told me not to unlock anything yet. The radio on his belt crackled once with someone checking in from the other side of the mall. We walked the center lane while the guard swung the beam across windshields. A soda can rolled a little in a gust and made that hollow aluminum rattle, and I still flinched. He angled to the gate to see if the latch was secure. He tipped the light up at the camera dome on the corner like he wanted it to catch his face, then circled back toward my row. I kept expecting a door to open or someone to stand up from between cars, because why else tell me the specific make and color unless you wanted me looking? He stepped to the far corner and swept the fence slats. I gripped my keys through my pocket so the points stuck out, dumb self-defense video stuff, and waited for him to finish. We stopped by my bumper and the guard crouched, flashlight down into the gap between my car and the next, then under my chassis, then over the trunk line like people actually hide in those tiny spaces. I realized I was holding my breath. Trent asked, "Good?" And the guard nodded without looking away. He checked the parking. There was no one suspicious. I got to my car without a problem. The guard stood by while I unlocked it. Engine turned over fine, and I was about to back out when my phone buzzed. Text from the same number. "I know where you live, apartment 7B on Maple Street, see you soon." My hands slipped off the shifter because that was my exact address, and I didn't overthink it. I called 911 right then from the lot. I gave them the number and the message and the manager's name, and that I was in the employee parking, and the dispatcher told me to stay put with the guard if I felt safer, which I did. So I left the car idling, and we waited. The guard kept glancing at the gate and said he'd already radioed building security too. The 15 minutes felt long, but not movie long. Just enough for every headlight on the far road to read wrong until a marked unit pulled in and parked nose to nose with my Civic. The officer was mid-30s, calm, asked for my ID, took my phone, scrolled with my permission, and wrote down the number. He asked if anyone at work or in my life had a reason to mess with me, and I said no. I mean, customers sometimes get weird, but not like this. He said, "We'll file a report, but the best thing tonight is don't go home alone." And it wasn't condescending. It was like a checklist. "Can you stay with someone?" I said yes, Sarah, 10 minutes away. And he said they'd do a drive-by at my address tonight, but they couldn't post someone there long-term. Trent told me to take the next day off if I wanted, and he'd clock me out manually, which I appreciated because my brain was stuck on that 7B like it was printed on my forehead. I turned off my car so I could think, then started it again. The officer waited until I was buckled. He said, "Take the main roads, no alley shortcuts. If someone follows you, don't stop. Call us. Drive to the station." The guard waved me through the gate, and Trent stood under the light until I pulled away. That was the last thing I saw in the mirror before I merged into normal Friday night traffic. I kept checking the rear view every block, and yeah, It made me drive like a senior driver, 2 hands on the wheel and signal early. And every time a car stayed behind me for more than one light, I changed lanes to see if they'd stick. None did. I called Sarah on speaker and said, "I'm coming over, don't freak out." And she didn't ask dumb questions. She said she'd meet me at her building's front door with the spare fob. At her place, we sat at the small kitchen table because that's where the outlets were, and I needed to plug in my dying phone, and I forwarded the text to the officer's email like he asked, and he replied back with a case number within the hour. We locked the deadbolt, and she pulled the bar across it. She has one of those cheap metal bars because her first floor window was jimmied once. And we kept the TV on but quiet while I wrote down a timeline for myself so I wouldn't forget details. I didn't sleep. I watched the parking lot under her window and pointed out normal people doing normal things to stop my head from running, like a guy walking a small dog or a pizza delivery at midnight. In the morning, an officer called and said the number was a prepaid SIM bought cash at a convenience store. "These are difficult to trace," he said, and I said, "So that's a dead end." And he said they'd log extra patrols on Maple for a couple nights. Sarah drove me to my place midday. We walked up together, no marks on my door, nothing missing. And later that evening I watched a cruiser roll by twice, and then nothing else happened. And that was somehow worse because I couldn't tell if I dodged something, or it was just starting. They told me to change my number and consider a protective order if the calls kept coming. But the calls stopped the same way they started. Just ended. No explanation. Nothing for me to push against. No more rings, no more texts, total silence. And the silence ate at me because at least noise has a source you can point at. I kept trying to reverse engineer who would care enough to do that. I'm not a person with drama. I sell shoes. I clock in and out. I tell people to size up in running socks to avoid blisters. And all I came up with was maybe a customer I denied a return, or someone who didn't like that I card for high-ticket fraud checks, or maybe a bored ex-coworker who got a kick out of scaring me because they knew the employee lot routine. I left that store 2 weeks later and took a smaller paycheck to do data entry in an office with keycards and cameras, and people who nod but don't ask personal questions. And I changed my phone number and swapped the locks in my apartment and labeled my peephole cover so I would actually use it. And I thought about moving, but when I looked at leases, it felt like I'd be starting a whole life over because of a voice I still couldn't place. A year and a half later, I still don't answer unknown calls. I copy the number and search it first. And sometimes I get hit with this thought like he didn't stop. He just moved on to whoever's schedule was easier to map. Or maybe it really was just some ugly joke and he forgot me the second I drove away from the store. But I haven't forgotten that last text or the way he listed my car and my unit like items on a list. Only when the flashlight bursts started blinking from different sides of the hill in the same synchronized pattern did I realize we were surrounded. 3 short flashes, pause, 2 long ones, pause, repeating from 4 separate points around our campsite, the distance closing with each cycle. But let me back up to how we ended up on that plateau in the first place. It was early September, and my husband David, our 7-year-old son Ethan, and I had planned this Utah Canyon trip for months. The first 3 days went perfectly. We stayed at established campsites in the national park, saw the petroglyphs, hiked the red rock formations. On the 4th evening, David suggested we find a more remote spot so Ethan could see the stars without light pollution. The GPS showed we were 20 miles from the nearest official campground when we turned onto a dirt road leading between 2 stone ridges. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand David's logic. He's cautious, ex-military reservist, not the reckless type. And he'd brought extra water, a satellite locator, and a first aid kit that could probably patch drywall. I wasn't worried. Ethan had been a champ all day, counting lizards on the trail, and I was actually excited for one quiet night off-grid. The dirt road climbed gradually, tire tracks baked into the surface, and the ridges opened into a small plateau. We killed the engine and just listened for a second. No traffic, no voices, just wind cutting through scrub. That's what we wanted, the quiet, and the sky already looked like a planetarium. The plateau we found looked perfect in the fading light. Flat ground, scattered fire rings made from stacked stones, clear views of the sky. No cell signal, but we had plenty of supplies and experience camping off-grid. We set up the tent as the sun disappeared behind the western ridge, cooked freeze-dried pasta on our portable stove, and Ethan fell asleep almost immediately after dinner, exhausted from the day's hike. David and I sat by our small campfire, talking quietly about extending the trip another few days. That's when I saw the first flash, brief and bright, like a camera flash, coming from the eastern slope about 200 yards away. I pointed it out to David, thinking maybe it was lightning, but the sky was clear. A minute later, an identical flash answered from the west, then another from the north. I said, "Could be hikers." And David shrugged like, "Maybe." But he stood to get a better look anyway. We dimmed the fire a bit, didn't douse it, just knocked it down, so our eyes could adjust, and we both stared into the dark. Another flash, this time from the south, and that's when it clicked that we were the center point. I felt that dumb prickle on the back of my neck. Not panic exactly, more like the moment you realize the door you just closed had a latch on the outside. David said maybe it was other campers signaling each other, trying to find their group in the dark. But his voice had that uncertain edge that told me he didn't really believe it. The flashes continued, and we started noticing the pattern. 3 short, pause, 2 long, pause, repeat. They were coming from 4 distinct positions now, forming a rough circle around our location. The intervals between flashes were getting shorter, and the lights seemed closer each time. "That's coordinated," David said low. He picked up the shovel and nudged the fire smaller so we weren't lit up like a stage. I asked if it could be Rangers. He shook his head. "Rangers don't play games." Another cycle hit, east, west, north, south, and in the brief wash of light I caught the glint of something metallic on the eastern ridge, like a reflector, not by accident. I whispered, "If they need help, they'd yell." He nodded. "They'd yell." I could hear Ethan's slow breathing through the tent fabric, and suddenly every zipper felt too loud. We didn't argue. We just moved. David pulled the truck keys from his pocket and checked the fob with his thumb to make sure he wouldn't accidentally beep the horn. He's done that before. We both thought of it at the same time. I grabbed the headlamps and turned the dimmest one on inside my jacket so it wouldn't broadcast. The pattern sped up again. 3 short, pause, 2 long, closer. "They're walking it in," he muttered. "Call 911?" I asked out of habit, then remembered the no service bars and felt stupid for saying it. He tried anyway, screen blank where the bars should be. He slid the phone into his chest pocket. "We go now. No headlights until we clear the ridge. If they're on the road, we backtrack on foot and cut to the wash." Logical, simple. It sounded like he'd rehearsed it, which calmed me for half a second. I crouched by the tent and unzipped an inch at a time. Ethan rolled and mumbled, and I froze until he settled. From the west slope, the 3 short, 2 long pulsed again, definitely closer, maybe 100 yards now. In between bursts, I heard a scuff of rock, the kind of sound you only make when you're trying not to make any sound. David whispered, "No shouting. Bundle him. Shoes first." He scanned the dark beyond the fire ring, body turned so he could see 2 directions at once. Old habits. I slid inside and put my hand over Ethan's shoulder. "Buddy, wake up. I breathed, barely a sound. He blinked, confused, and I brought my finger to my lips. Quiet game, okay? Jacket on. He nodded because he loves the quiet game. We made it up for doctor visits. Outside, David tamped the last orange out of the coals with the shovel head, leaving us in near black, only starlight and those cold flashes strobing the rocks. Ethan sat up while I eased his shoes onto his feet, heel cups, tug, Velcro. Then I helped him into his puffy jacket, zipper teeth catching once and then sliding. He whispered, "Bathroom?" And I shook my head. In the car. Another round of lights strobed, and I felt the tent skin flicker white, close enough now that I could see the pattern reflected in Ethan's eyes. Without discussing it, we both knew we needed to wake Ethan and leave. I crawled into the tent as quietly as possible, while David started gathering our essentials: phones, wallets, car keys, water bottles. I shook Ethan awake gently, whispering that we were going to sleep in the car tonight, like a treat, not an emergency. He was groggy but didn't argue, clutching his stuffed dinosaur while I slid his arms into the jacket. Through the tent's mesh, I saw a silhouette against the sky, maybe 30 yards out, crouching, then standing, crouching, then standing. The hand motioned with a flashlight like it was sending. I zipped Ethan's jacket and forced my hands to be steady. David appeared at the flap and pointed at the SUV 15 feet away. We moved without a word because broadcasting that we knew would only make it worse. The flashes stopped, which felt worse. I slipped Ethan's shoes on, tucked the dinosaur into his hood, and killed the tent lantern. At the SUV, I flipped the dome switch to off so the interior wouldn't light. David mouthed ready, and I nodded. He went first, scanning. A small rock clicked on the eastern slope and the silhouette sank lower like it was settling. "Stay behind me," he whispered, and we padded across the hard ground. I eased Ethan through the rear door, keeping it from thudding, and he crawled behind the driver's seat like we'd practiced. I slid into the passenger side and held the door an inch open to bleed the sound. David paused at the driver's door, and in that pause a brief northern flash blinked and died like a test. A faint voice carried, too soft to parse, then footsteps skittered and stopped. David sealed his door, set the key, and counted under his breath. When I hit it, "Hold on," he said, and pushed my door closed with 2 fingers so it wouldn't bounce. Silence stretched. Another rock slid somewhere left. David started the engine and snapped the high beams, and we both flinched at what they revealed. 4 adults stood in a loose semicircle 30 feet out, right where the flashes had been, torn hiking clothes, faces dark against the glare, shoulders tilted forward like they were ready to move. The middle one lifted a hand, maybe to shield eyes, maybe to signal. David dropped into reverse, carved a J, and punched forward through the brush. Someone on the left lunged and slapped the taillight and vanished in dust. Brush hammered the undercarriage and the SUV shook. In the mirror, they broke into a run. They didn't chase chaotically. They spread, disciplined, one still working a flashlight in clipped bursts as they came. A beam glanced off our rear glass and my head ducked. David killed the highs, rode the lows, then killed those too, and drove by memory for a long 10 count until we cleared the ridgeline. We hit the main dirt track and he pushed it to the edge of what the suspension would take. "Seat belt," he said, and I clipped mine and reached back and clipped Ethan's. A fork came that I didn't remember, and he took the downhill left without debating because up meant silhouette, and the left showed faint, fresh tires. He blacked out the lights on ridge sections, brought them back to low in the washes, repeating. Once, a flash punched the rear window again, farther back now. "They're still there," he said, but he didn't slow. The road turned to washboard, and the wheel chattered in his hands. A jackrabbit cut across and he held course. time went weird. The GPS finally picked up the pale line of highway. Dawn leaked at the horizon, and then the tires found pavement, and the hum changed, and all three of us exhaled. We took the first ranger station with a flag and 2 trucks outside. Inside, a graying ranger listened while David laid out the basics, and I filled in distances and rough bearings. He looked irritated at first. People ignore sight rules all the time. But that dropped when he clocked our shaking hands. He took our statement. He said it might be an illegal grow or a stash or something tied to a drug operation, that crews sometimes occupy remote benches and don't want witnesses, that the signals sounded like perimeter calls. He couldn't place the exact plateau from our description and radioed 2 units anyway. He told us to stick to established sites if we kept camping and to call if we remembered a landmark. We nodded because arguing was pointless and because Ethan had fallen asleep across the back seat with the dinosaur wedged under his chin. We bought gas at the first lit station and kept driving until rock turned to fields. I keep replaying the synchronized flashes and the way they moved, and it makes a brutal kind of sense. If you're running something out there, you mark your perimeter and you push unknowns out fast. But I can't stop thinking how quiet it was, and how close they got without a word, and how if we'd fumbled one latch or chirped one horn, we might not have seen the highway at dawn. Back in November 2022, my friend Tiffany asked me if I could stay at her house for 2 weeks while she was in rehab in Arizona. Tiffany had been struggling with painkiller addiction for about 3 years, and this was her 4th attempt at getting clean, but she sounded really determined this time. I worked remotely for a marketing agency, so moving for a couple weeks wasn't a big deal. I just packed my laptop and some clothes and drove over to her place in a Phoenix suburb. Her parents had bought the house for her, hoping stability would help her get her life together, but so far, it hadn't worked. The first evening I was there, around 8 o'clock, I was upstairs in the guest bedroom unpacking when someone knocked on the door. Not a doorbell ring, a knock, hard and insistent. I froze for a second, then picked up my phone and walked to the landing so I could listen. It wasn't a delivery knock, and Tiffany never mentioned anyone dropping by, so I went down carefully, staying off the creaky step because I didn't want to advertise that I was alone. I went downstairs and looked through the peephole. A woman in her 40s wearing a business suit stood on the porch, holding a tablet. Behind her, standing a little back, was a man in a black t-shirt and jeans with his arms crossed. I didn't know these people, and something about them made me nervous, so I didn't open the door right away. "Yes?" I called through the door. The woman smiled, very professional. "Good evening. We're looking for Tiffany Harris. Is she home?" I was immediately suspicious. "She's not here. Can I take a message?" The woman's smile stayed, but her voice got harder. "It's very important we speak with her personally." "When will she be back?" I asked who they were. The woman glanced at the man, then looked back at the door. "We represent a financial services company. Miss Harris has outstanding obligations that need to be discussed. We need to talk about repayment options. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand that Tiffany had specifically told me not to tell anyone where she was. She'd mentioned debts, credit cards, some loans she'd taken out during her worst period, and that certain calls were getting aggressive. She said, 'Just tell people I'm gone and call me after. Don't say where.' Keeping that in mind, I kept the deadbolt thrown and my hand on the chain. 'She's out of town for a few weeks,' I said. 'Leave your contact information and I'll pass it along.' The woman didn't move her smile. 'I'm afraid that won't work,' she said. 'The debt amount is $18,000 and the payment deadline has long passed. If Miss Harris doesn't make contact within 48 hours, we'll be forced to file with the court and begin asset seizure procedures.' $18,000? Tiffany had never mentioned a number that high. I kept my voice even. When did this start? The woman ignored the question and repeated that a call from Tiffany was required, not a house sitter. I said I'd try to reach her and ask them to come back tomorrow. The man in the black t-shirt finally spoke, low. We just need to confirm she's aware. He wasn't threatening exactly, but he kept looking past the door like he was trying to memorize the layout from shadows. The woman tapped her tablet like she was logging my answer. Tomorrow, she said. Same time. Delay adds interest. It's in her best interest to resolve this quickly. I repeated that I'd pass along their information and didn't give them anything else. Put your card under the mat, I said, not opening. Through the peephole, I watched the woman write on a sticky note and hold it up to the glass. Company name I didn't recognize and a 480 number. No last names. I didn't take it. The guy took a couple steps down, glanced at the driveway, the side gate, and the street like he was making a mental map. They lingered a few seconds, then stepped off the porch together. They didn't go to a car right away. They walked to the corner and stopped under the streetlight, talking, then disappeared out of view. I waited with my eye to the peephole until my legs hurt. Then I checked the side flood and the back fence latch, slid the metal bar into the patio door track, and made a fast loop through the kitchen and garage to confirm the service door lock. Upstairs again, I sat on the bed with Tiffany's contact open. She'd given me a rehab number for emergencies and told me not to use it unless I had to. Was this had to? I didn't want to blow up her intake on day one, but strangers at the door throwing around court and seizure wasn't something I could ignore. I called her cell first, straight to voicemail. I stared at the wall for a second, hung up, and went back downstairs. Tiffany kept a manila folder labeled BILLS in the kitchen drawer by the fridge, her idea of organized. I flipped through the top few, past due balances, late fees, a final notice from a lender I recognized. Nothing that said $18,000 by itself. I took quick photos and put everything back exactly how I found it, because I didn't want to be the reason something went missing later and turned into a fight. When I peeked through the blinds, the guy in the black t-shirt was across the street by the curb, on his phone, eyes on the house. He wasn't smoking or killing time. He was reporting. I turned off the upstairs light so I wouldn't silhouette, watched him finish his call, then watched him come back and stick the sticky note to the glass like he wanted to prove he'd left information. They both stood there a beat like they were listening for footsteps. I didn't give them any. Eventually they moved on for real, past the corner and out of sight. I waited another full minute anyway, counting slow, because I didn't want to open my mouth while they were still in earshot and somehow make this worse. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Tiffany's name with the rehab number underneath, thought about what I was going to say, no details, just urgent, and decided I wasn't guessing about $18,000. They left, and I immediately called Tiffany. It took Tiffany a long time to answer, and when she did, her voice was sleepy, like I dragged her out of some rigid clinic schedule where lights go out at 9 and phones get locked up. I kept it short and told her about the visitors, the woman with the tablet and the guy who wouldn't stop looking past me like he lived there. Tiffany woke up fast. What woman? What did she look like? I described the suit, dark hair, around 40, the whole professional act. She exhaled hard. Those are debt collectors, Nikki. Don't open the door for them. Don't sign anything. Don't even talk to them. That debt, it's complicated, but I'm working with a lawyer on it. They're not allowed to come to the house without warning like this. I said, okay. I'd keep it tight. What if they come back? I asked. Tell them I'm away and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Nothing else. And if they push, call the police. We hung up because her time was almost over and I went room to room once more, checked the slider bar, checked the garage door bolt, set my phone volume to max, and tried to sleep. The next evening, right at 8, like they had my schedule, the knock came again. Same rhythm, same insistence. I was already at the top of the stairs. I didn't even go down to the door. I yelled through it that Tiffany would be back in 2 weeks and all questions should go through her lawyer. The woman tried to talk over me like a neighbor, all soft, saying it would only take a second. I repeated myself louder and added that if they kept coming by, I'd call the cops. Silence, then a muffled, "Understood." I waited with my ear against the door for a good minute, then watched the peephole go from suit to empty porch to nothing at all. The woman said something back, but I didn't listen, just walked away from the door because there was nothing else to add without making it worse. I locked the bottom and top again even though they were already locked and went to the kitchen because I needed motion more than caffeine. An hour later, when I was in there making tea, metal kettle already heating, I heard footsteps on gravel in the backyard. Fast, not animal, and I cut the burner and slid to the window over the sink. The guy in the black t-shirt stood by the fence, turned sideways so I could only see part of his face, looking at the house like he was measuring angles. He wasn't smoking, he wasn't on a call. He was just there, hands low, weight on one leg like he had time. I grabbed my phone, pulled up 911, and held my thumb just above the call button because I didn't want to trigger a whole mess if it was some contractor or a neighbor who'd wandered back there by mistake. There was no reason for anyone to be there. I didn't shout. I didn't open anything. I just watched him pivot to the side gate, put a hand near the latch without touching it, and then look up toward the windows like he was cataloging what he could see. I backed up one step and kept the phone out. I turned on all the outside lights, the bright floods that blasted the yard and lit the fence like a stage wall. He snapped his head toward the light, then toward the window like he'd guessed where I was, and moved fast, walking off the view and around the side of the house. I took 3 steps to the sliding door, made sure the metal bar was still jammed in the track, checked the latch on the side gate through the glass, and listened. Gravel again on the side path, then nothing. I stayed at the window for another hour, kettle cold, tea bag sitting there like a prop, and no one came back. I cycled the locks again just to mark time and kept the lights on. I called Tiffany and told her exactly what I saw. No extra drama, just positions and timing. She started crying, apologizing, saying she never thought they'd go this far. I told her I was fine, the lights worked, the locks were good, and that I'd call 911 the second anyone crossed a line. For the rest of the 2 weeks, I kept a pattern that made sense. Laptop at the kitchen table facing the yard, shoes by the back door, keys on the hook, outside lights on a dusk timer, my phone charged. A couple times I thought I heard someone on the side path, and it was a possum or a trash lid clacking, but I still wrote down days and times in notes just in case. They didn't come back. When Tiffany came home from the clinic, she looked better. Clear eyes, steady hands, focused. We sat at that table with the manila folder, and she walked me through it. The debt was from a loan she'd taken during her worst months to buy pills, interest stacked, and a bankruptcy attorney was sorting it out. She said the visit to the house wasn't allowed, and that she'd already looped her lawyer, who'd handle any contact. She thanked me for not opening the door and for flipping the lights, because it gave her something concrete to report, not just feelings. I believed her because she had dates and numbers and a plan that didn't sound like a fantasy, and she looked like someone who could follow rules again. I was glad I could help my friend, but for weeks after I couldn't stop thinking about that man standing in the dark backyard, watching the house. So, when I was going through my divorce, I needed somewhere quiet to clear my head. My Aunt Martha owned a small 6-room inn up in the mountains, about 2 hours from the nearest city. She offered to let me stay at her house, which was separate from the inn, about 500 yards up the slope. I'd help with the housework in exchange for room and board. The internet was slow, TV got 3 channels, and the evenings were long and quiet. I got used to the routine quickly, going to bed early, waking early, taking long walks. Aunt Martha often stayed overnight at the inn when she had guests, leaving me alone at the house. It was peaceful, exactly what I needed. That evening, Martha was staying at the inn because a large group of tourists had arrived. I was sitting at home going through her old photo albums. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand the layout. The porch faced a narrow dirt road that curled up from the main drive. There was a motion light over the steps and a rusted bell Martha had hung for deliveries, because the doorbell inside barely worked. Her truck was at the inn, so the driveway by the house was empty. Nothing to block a vehicle if one pulled in. The nearest neighbor was a mile down slope. My phone had 1 bar on a good night, which was normal. The kitchen window looked directly at the yard, and from the table you could hear engines long before you saw headlights. It felt safe enough to read old captions and get lost in names I didn't know. It was around 10 p.m. when I remembered I'd ordered some face cream online that morning. The site promised delivery within 3 days. I didn't think it would arrive so quickly, especially not in the evening. But then my phone buzzed with a notification stating my package would be delivered today before 11 p.m. I was surprised but figured maybe the courier was returning home on this route and decided to drop it off. Rural favors are a thing up here. I texted Martha. Weird. Says deliver by 11? And put the kettle on anyway. I sat waiting. At 11 o'clock I heard the sound of an engine, a van climbing the dirt road to the house. I went out onto the porch. The van stopped about 20 yards from the house, but the headlights didn't turn off. I waited for the driver to get out, but he didn't. A minute passed, then another. I started getting nervous. This was strange. Maybe he was checking the address on his GPS. I called out, "Hey there! Need the porch light?" and flicked the switch. The motion lamp clicked on, throwing a dull cone across the steps and part of the yard. The van was one of those plain white panel ones, no company logo, a dent on the back fender, a temporary tag hanging crooked. Little things you notice when you're alone and trying to make sense of why someone won't just get out already. The engine kept idling. No window rolled down. No interior light. The kettle started to murmur inside and I could hear my own breathing. And I thought about how far we were from anyone. It felt dumb to stand there staring at a windshield glare like I was waiting for it to blink. Nothing. I almost went in to lock the door and just let whoever it was knock, but the stupid notification said before 11 p.m. and it was 11:06, and I was in that mindset of let's just get this done, sign and be done. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight, waved my hand. The beam bounced off the windshield and made the glare worse, so I angled it down toward the ground like, "Hey, I see you." The van continued to idle in place, engine steady. I decided to walk over myself. Maybe the driver needed a signature or was stuck on the app or something. I stepped off the porch and onto packed dirt, counted 5 steps, then 8, and suddenly the side door of the van began to slowly open. There was no light inside, only a rectangle of black. I stopped. Something was wrong. No clipboard, no voice, no evening ma'am. Just that open dark and the sound of the engine. "Hello?" I said, thinner than I meant. The door paused half open and held. Nobody moved. The exhaust drifted white and the engine clicked in that hot metal way. I don't scare easy, but this was off. The non-logo, the timing, the way he'd parked short of the turnaround. I kept cataloging dumb details because they felt like handholds and not like me standing in a yard alone at night, waving a light at nothing. At that moment, I heard Aunt Martha's voice behind me telling me not to approach the vehicle. "Don't you go near that van," she said. Not loud, just flat and hard. I turned and she was at the edge of the woods where the foot trail met the yard. Apparently she'd been climbing up to the house on foot. She was holding a hunting rifle in that casual, practiced way she used when she checked for coyotes near the chicken pen. "Back to the steps," she said. I did, keeping my phone light down. "It's a delivery. My phone says," I started. "No, it isn't," she said. "Not up here, not this late." She added, lower. "They've been casing the inn road all week. Twice after midnight. Same kind of van." She stepped to the bottom of the steps and raised the rifle. "Driver! State your business and kill the engine," she called. When I looked back at the van, the door had already closed and the vehicle was beginning to turn around. A slow three-point with the front tires skidding on loose rock, the nose swinging toward the trees instead of the drive like whoever was inside was flustered. Martha yelled something I couldn't make out and braced the rifle. "Hey!" she shouted, and fired a shot into the air. The van took off down the road at tremendous speed, no headlights, and the sound dropped fast as it slipped behind the trees. We went inside. Martha locked the door, slid the deadbolt, set the rifle by the umbrella stand, and called the police on her old flip phone because it kept a signal. She gave our location by mile marker and the inn's name, told the dispatcher the driver had sat with a side door open, and told me to stay away from the windows. I killed the porch light and stood by the table while she repeated our names and that there were no injuries now. The deputies rolled up about 20 minutes later, grill strobes on but headlights off. They traced the turn marks with their lights and pointed to where a rear tire had chewed into the yard. One asked what I had seen, and I said plain white panel van, dented back fender, temporary tag. He said people stick on magnetic logos and peel them off before the highway, and either way, it was not a delivery service. The other asked to see the message, said the text came from an unknown sender ID, not the store, and told me to screenshot everything. They took a statement from Martha on the porch. She said she had seen that same style of van twice near the inn's back service road after midnight that week, and had written down part of a plate. She told them about the poachers she ran off in September when they tried to cross the fence line and she would not allow it. Maybe they decided to scare her or me. Or maybe it was not them. The older deputy said there had been attacks on lone tourists last year and that a rural house with a light on could look like an easy mark. They asked about the shot, and Martha said she had fired straight up to warn, not at the van, and the deputy wrote that and nodded. They offered to sweep the road to the county line and to swing past the inn, and Martha said yes. Before they left, the older deputy told me not to open a door at night to any unmarked vehicle, not to step off the porch when something felt wrong, and to stop treating messages as proof. If it is real, it can wait till morning, he said, and he suggested motion cameras and calling the store or the carrier before stepping outside again. They pulled away, and their taillights vanished around the curve. The real package did not arrive until a week later. A marked truck and a driver in a vest scanned it on the porch and checked my ID. He said the text was not theirs. I lived with Martha for 2 more months, and every evening I checked the locks and kept my phone close. What bothers me most is how targeted it felt. Someone knew I had ordered something online, knew the timing, knew I was alone that night. And that van sitting there with the engine running, the side door open into darkness. It was not just intimidation. They were waiting for me to get close enough. I think about what would have happened if Martha had not come up that trail at that moment, if she had not brought the rifle, if she had paused at the inn. The police never found the van or the sender. Martha thinks poachers, but I am not so sure. I never ordered anything online to that address again. I only noticed the notebook on my balcony railing because my hand almost touched it when I was reaching for my coffee mug. It was just a regular school notebook, lined pages, completely soaked from yesterday's rain. And it shouldn't have been there at all because my balcony is small and I don't keep stuff on the railing. There's nothing to keep from blowing away. My apartment was on the 4th floor of the college dorm, balcony facing the inner courtyard, and I'd been living there for my 2nd year studying engineering. Across the yard, maybe 30 meters away, stood the old university administration building that nobody really used anymore. The windows were almost always dark. Only occasionally I'd see a light flicker in the far wing, probably janitors or maintenance, that kind of thing. I flipped through the notebook out of curiosity, and the paper came apart in places, but the ink held enough to read, pages filled with small handwriting, dates, times, short notes about my actions. 3:30 p.m., returned from gym, blue t-shirt. 10:10 p.m., talking on phone by window, laughing. 1:40 a.m., turned off living room light. I checked the first date I could make out and then the last, and the entries went back 3 months, consistent, almost daily, sometimes 3 or 4 notes per day, like someone punching a time clock on my life. My first reaction was disbelief, maybe someone's stupid prank, but the details were way too accurate and too boring to be a joke, like who writes microwaved leftovers 12:11 for fun. I stood there trying to remember the last few weeks, and I realized there'd been this weird uneasiness when I was alone, like something in the corner when nothing was there. And a few times I thought objects in my apartment had moved slightly, my phone charger not where I left it. A book turned to a different page. I blamed my own mess. I'd chalked it up to exhaustion and being buried in circuits and statics. And honestly, I'd laughed at myself. Now I was holding this soaked notebook, and I understood that someone had been methodically watching me for months, not creatively, just clinically. The last entry, dated 2 days ago, read, "Ordered pizza at 7 p.m., ate alone, then watched something on laptop until 1 a.m. That was exactly right, and it nailed the part where I paused the movie to answer a call at like 9:20, because below it there was paused at 9:20 for phone. I stepped out onto the balcony, set the notebook down because my hands were shaking more from adrenaline than fear, or maybe both, and tried to figure out where someone could have such a clear view of my apartment. Most windows in the admin building were at bad angles. Some were boarded inside, but in the central section there was one room directly across, a window with no curtains, dusty glass, but nothing to block a line of sight. I cupped my hands to cut glare and stared at that rectangle until my eyes watered. I ran downstairs. The elevator seemed too slow, and I didn't even wait for it to show up. Just took the stairs 2 at a time, crossed the courtyard cutting over the grass because using the path felt like wasting seconds, and slipped through the back entrance into the old building. The door had that metal bar you push and it gave way with a dull clunk. The hallways smelled of dust and mold, linoleum peeling off the floor in places, those brown bulletin boards with curled flyers for stuff that ended last semester. I climbed to the 4th floor, and the air felt warmer and stiller, like nobody had opened a window up there in a year. I counted the windows as I moved, checked angles, then found the right door. It was slightly ajar, not enough to be inviting, just enough to show that it hadn't latched. I pushed it with 2 fingers, stepped in, and stopped. Inside was a folding chair facing the window, legs splayed a little like someone had leaned back hard, and a plastic table with takeout food boxes and a half-empty bottle of water. On the windowsill lay a pair of binoculars with a rubber neck strap. Nothing else, no backpack, no clothes, no ID, just this improvised observation post like something you'd set up for a few hours and then reset again tomorrow. I grabbed the binoculars and looked out the window, and my apartment was perfectly visible, even better than I expected. Every detail of my living room, the corner where my couch stood, the desk by the window where I worked on my computer, the little lamp with the chipped shade. Everything laid out like a diagram. I lowered the binoculars, and my brain started doing simple math about distance and angle, and how if the chair stayed put, the lens height matched mine seated at the desk. I reached down and opened one of the takeout boxes with my knuckle. Cold noodles, chopsticks snapped cleanly, no sauce packets, nothing with a logo that would help. I touched the water bottle. It was room temperature, cap twisted on, but not tight. I stepped sideways, checking the door frame for tape or a hair or anything that would tell me if I'd just broken someone's cheap security. And that's when I heard footsteps in the corridor and froze. They were approaching slowly, methodically, then stopped right outside the door. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it was audible from outside, and I didn't breathe. Didn't even shift because the floor under the linoleum had that weak spot that creaked. And I didn't want to announce myself. Not here. Not like this. A few seconds of silence stretched. Nothing but that low building hum. And then the footsteps moved away in the opposite direction. Careful. Like whoever it was didn't want to run but needed distance. Which made sense if they knew how sound travels in these halls. I waited 2 more beats, counted them out of habit the way we do in labs when we watch a meter. Then I eased the door open with my knuckles and kept my shoulders square to the frame so I wasn't a clean silhouette. The corridor was empty to the left and right, just long beige walls and wired glass in the stairwell door. No loose paper, no shadow moving, nothing. I said, "Hey," loud enough to carry, felt stupid right after, and nothing answered, just the HVAC clicking somewhere. I jogged for the stairs, pushed through, and looked down the square shaft where you can see between flights. Nobody, just flaking paint and an old coffee cup on a landing that hadn't been there earlier. I went down fast, hand on the rail, 3 steps, turned the corner, and the only sound was the echo of a door slamming somewhere below, heavy and metal, direction hard to pin. I took the next flight 2 at a time, cut through the ground-level corridor past a dead vending machine and a mop bucket, and hit the push bar to the back exit. Daylight made me blink, and the door thudded behind me, and now the courtyard was the same as always. Brick, patchy grass, the bike rack, except for 2 students cutting toward the library with backpacks, not even glancing at the admin building. I scanned the paths, the service lane, the dumpster alcove, and nothing moved. Whoever it was had vanished, like they'd rehearsed it, like they knew the angles better than me. I listened for footsteps that weren't mine, and heard wind in the vent grates and a car horn from the street beyond the dorms. Nothing useful. I looked at my dorm windows and then back at that dark rectangle I'd been standing behind minutes ago and thought, okay, either they're still up there in a different room or they're gone completely. I realized I was still holding the binoculars, my fingerprints all over them. Dumb. But I didn't want to leave them because then they'd vanish too, so I kept them and walked to the center of the yard to get a better angle, straight sight lines. From there, I could see up into my living room, the floor lamp, the couch arm, the edge of my desk where the laptop sits, all the straight geometry that made this possible, and it hit me how open it all was. I raised the binoculars on reflex, focused, caught my own window crisp, then lowered them, because if someone else was set up in a different room, they could watch me doing exactly that and add a line about it. I checked for any non-student movement, maintenance cart, security jacket, anything, and got nothing, just normal campus. I checked the time on my phone, thought about calling campus security right then decided I wanted the evidence in my hands first before any of this walked away. I headed back toward my building, but halfway there I stopped and turned to face the admin windows one more time, trying to decide if the silhouette I thought I saw was actually just my brain pattern matching against glare. The longer I stared, the less certain I was, and the feeling crawled up my neck, so I went inside. After that, I installed heavy curtains on all my windows and didn't go out on the balcony for several days. I turned the notebook over to university security, but they found nothing. The building had no cameras, and access was open through an unlocked back door, and the officer basically said they'd increase patrols and to call if anything else happened, which felt like a form letter. Sometimes, late at night, I look at the windows of the admin building and I think I see a silhouette behind one of them. Just a darker shape that doesn't line up with the mullions. I still don't know who it was or why someone so carefully documented my life. Like I was some kind of research subject. Not interesting, just predictable. What scares me is thinking about how many of my private moments this stranger saw, recorded, and maybe saved somewhere else with timestamps and little notes the same way they wrote about my pizza. I moved to a different dorm building at the start of this semester. Different courtyard, different angles. But I still check my balcony every morning, just in case. Back in 2008, when I was 13, our school was this typical red brick building from the 50s with a maze of hallways and an old basement where students weren't allowed to go. Samantha was in my 7th grade class, and people called her weird behind her back. Sometimes not even behind her back, and she never reacted except to stare right through you. She filled page after page with black spirals, like tight circles that swallowed the whole sheet. And if a teacher asked what she was drawing, she'd clamp her notebook shut and hunch over it. The admin knew she had issues. This was before anyone really took that seriously at our age. Like they'd just say, give her space, and move on. And twice she shoved kids in the hallway for brushing her shoulder. Got 3-day suspensions each time. The principal kept saying inclusive education, his words. And then she tore up a few textbooks in the library. Literally ripped the covers off, and her parents pulled her for a month to homeschool. But then she came back like nothing had happened. My locker was 2 down from hers, and I remember the sound her binders made, like this scraping stack she carried pressed to her chest, and the spirals were everywhere. Fronts of folders, margins of quizzes, the backs of worksheets, like she couldn't stop. Once I heard a teacher whisper that her parents were trying everything, which meant nothing to us. She still sat alone at lunch, still stared at the floor during group work. If you said hi, she either didn't say anything or she'd flinch and mutter "don't," which, yeah, made people keep their distance. There were signs we didn't clock. She always paused by the gray metal door that led to the basement. Janitors only. Chained latch. Do not enter. In faded block letters. And she'd stand there a beat too long, like counting. Once I caught her tracing the chipped paint with her fingernail. I remember thinking it was just Samantha being Samantha. We all did that, shrugged and moved on. 'Cause what are 7th graders supposed to do about a kid who draws black holes all day? On Friday night we had the science fair and the building stayed open until 9, which felt huge to us. Being in classrooms in the dark with display boards and extension cords taped to the floor. Parents walked around with punch cups, and teachers pretended the volcano projects weren't all the same. I helped my friend set up his potato battery, and then went home early because my mom had to be up at 5. Nothing felt off then, nothing obvious anyway. Monday morning blew that up. 2 cops and our vice principal, Mrs. Collins, were at the front entrance with faces like they'd practiced not panicking. Instead of the schoolyard, we were routed straight inside. Teachers were in the hall with keys out, calling our names and funneling us into classrooms, and then the doors clicked and the blinds came down. That had literally never happened. Mrs. Hart, our homeroom teacher, kept clearing her throat and asking if anyone stayed late on Friday, if anyone saw something unusual by the science wing, the stairs, the basement. We all looked at each other like, what? A girl said her dad left early 'cause of parking. A boy said he forgot his trifold and came back for it. Nobody had anything real, and the silence got heavy. About half an hour in, The old intercom crackled, and Principal Wilson's voice came over. Too careful. He said there'd been a serious incident involving our biology teacher, Miss Parker, and that she was in the hospital. He said we were safe, and that police were investigating, and that teachers would keep us in rooms until further notice. No details. He signed off and the speaker popped like a cartoon, and then nobody talked for a while. I think that was when my stomach finally dropped. We spent the whole day shut in. No recess, no gym, just quiet reading and board games that didn't feel fun. By lunch, the rumor mill was going. 8th graders said a teacher got attacked on Saturday morning. 6th graders said someone broke in and smashed microscopes. Mrs. Hart kept saying, "Don't speculate," and "Let's be respectful." But the whispers didn't stop. By 3rd period, I realized Samantha wasn't there. Actually, she hadn't been there Friday either, and that felt like a detail I should have noticed sooner. I wrote her name on the top of my notebook without meaning to, and then scratched it out so hard the paper tore. That evening, my mom had her phone out at the kitchen counter, scrolling the parent chat, and she told me what people were saying. Half of them swore. They had it from a reliable source. Miss Parker, she was 26, first year out of college, the kind teacher who let you redo labs if you messed up, had come in Saturday morning to grab materials for Monday's lesson. She'd parked out back, used her teacher key, and headed for the basement storage where they kept the old microscopes and boxes of slides. And when she opened that basement door, Samantha jumped out of the dark and hit her with a heavy anatomy textbook. Those big ones with the glossy spine and the cross-sections, swung it over and over at her head. My mom said multiple times like she was quoting. And Miss Parker somehow staggered upward toward the exit and managed to get to the doorway and call for help. Police found Samantha in the gym, hiding behind the stacked blue gymnastics mats near the bleachers, knees pulled up, hoodie over her head, like she'd been waiting to be told what to do next. They'd swept the building room by room after Miss Parker's 911 call, and blood on the stairwell led them away from the basement, through the science wing, and toward the gym doors. So it wasn't some detective show miracle. It was just steady work and common sense. An officer said, "Don't run," and she didn't. He told her to show her hands and step out slow, and she did. And when he cuffed her, she said something like, "I didn't break anything," which made no sense to me at all later. They led her past the trophy case. None of us saw it, obviously, but kids always know details before adults admit them. The next week, a detective came to our class with Mrs. Collins and did the calm voice thing while we sat in a circle and kept our feet still. He said they were piecing together a timeline from Friday night to Saturday morning, and he asked if anyone had seen Samantha at the fair, or if anyone knew about her hanging around the basement before. Nobody raised a hand. He said phrases like open communication and non-judgmental space, and then he collected our names anyway because that's what they have to do. Mrs. Hart told him about the time Samantha paused at the basement door, and he wrote that down. He asked me about lockers near hers, and I told him what I knew. The binders, the spirals, the way she kept her head down. He nodded and looked tired. The investigation got practical after that. Our building only had cameras on the main entrance and the front hall. Budget stuff, always has been. So they couldn't tell how she'd slipped back in after the fair, or where she hid before the janitors locked up. Rumors said a side door latch sometimes didn't set unless you yanked it hard. Another rumor said a student had propped a door with a folded brochure to run out to a car and never pulled it. What they put in writing later was they couldn't determine point of entry, and that she evaded detection after closing. She'd spent the night on campus. She went down to the basement and waited. For how long, who knows, but long enough to pick that spot and stand in the dark with that book in her hands. Now, before I explain the rest, you need to understand what came out about her home life wasn't like some evil parent story. The report said Samantha had stopped taking her mood stabilization meds months earlier, had been having escalating aggressive episodes, and her parents hadn't told the school because they were afraid of more suspensions, more paperwork, another push to move her. That doesn't excuse it. It just explains why no one in the building knew her baseline had changed. She'd already shoved 2 kids, ripped up materials, and if you asked why everyone looked the other way, you'd get a lot of shrugging and the word accommodations. Miss Parker's injuries were what made it real in my head. Concussion. Shoulder injury from throwing her arm up when the book hit. She stayed in the hospital a week, and when she got discharged, she went to her sister's for a while. That part I got from my mom. The district put out a statement and sent a counselor to her classes. She came back to teaching a year later, but in a completely different district, over 2 towns. No one blamed her. If anything, we were surprised she wanted to teach again at all. I still remember her lab cart with the taped-on checklist and the neat handwriting that said, "Rinse slides." They put Samantha in a specialized facility for kids in crisis, the kind with locked units and day school. And I heard through the same parent chat that her parents moved out of state shortly after the court stuff wrapped. The school reacted like institutions do after something bad happens. New cameras in every hall and stairwell. A policy that security had to sweep the building after any evening event. Every door check logged. IDS for parents at night events. Staff pairs if anyone needed to access storage on weekends. Teachers joked, not joked about carrying walkie-talkies. The gray basement door got a keypad and a new sign. They even fixed the latch on the side door and put a metal plate over the frame so you couldn't wedge it with paper, which, yeah, we all noticed. What sticks with me isn't the policies or even the news clip. It's the part where a girl our age wandered those empty halls all night, went down into the basement, and waited for someone who wasn't even connected to her. Miss Parker had never been her teacher. There was no beef, just proximity and opportunity. And I go back and forth on whether there was a moment, a tiny one, when this could have been stopped if an adult had seen the pause by the basement door, or if her parents had told the truth about the meds. And it's not about blame. It's about how thin the line was between normal Friday stuff and a Saturday morning phone call from a hallway that smelled like dust and old chemicals. And I hope she got the help she needed years before any of it. But she didn't. And the rest of us learned how to look at doors and think about locks. So this happened on a regular Thursday night. Nothing special about it. I was just grabbing groceries after work. It was around 8 p.m. when I finished shopping and headed to my car in the supermarket parking lot. The lot was still pretty well lit, but most people had already cleared out from the after-work rush. I loaded my bags into the trunk, got behind the wheel, and pulled out onto the main road heading toward my neighborhood. It was a straight shot, maybe 15 minutes, and I had the radio on thinking about what I'd make for dinner. Traffic was light, just a few cars passing in the opposite direction. Everything felt completely normal, and I was relaxed. About 5 minutes into the drive, I noticed a gray sedan in my rearview mirror, staying a steady distance behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were on a main road and lots of people lived this way. But when I turned onto a side street toward my subdivision, the sedan turned too. I frowned and decided to test it. Instead of continuing toward my house, I made another turn, left onto a street I never use. The sedan followed. Now I was sure. This wasn't a coincidence. My heart rate picked up and I gripped the wheel, trying to figure out what to do. I told myself maybe they're lost. Don't be dramatic. I took another right, then a slow roll through a cul-de-sac and back out. The gray headlights paused at the stop sign and then slid after me again, same gap. I checked my doors, locked, my gas, half tank, and my phone on the passenger seat with the cracked case. The road had a couple of speed bumps. I eased over them, hoping they'd pass. They didn't. I feathered my brakes, then accelerated. They mirrored me like I was on a leash. I even flicked my turn signal right, then went straight. Petty, I know. But their blinker never came on. They just shadowed. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand my neighborhood layout. If you turn right at Maple and then left at the elementary school, that's the quick way home, 2 more blocks. If you miss that, you end up in a pocket of dead-end streets with long stretches and not many houses, just wooden fences and blind corners. I'd walked that route with my neighbor's dog and always thought how easy it would be to box a car in there. So I made a rule right then. Do not turn into the pocket. Do not stop where someone can trap you bumper to bumper. I rolled past Maple on purpose, made a wider loop toward the commercial strip. The sedan came with me. I did the old driveway reverse. They idled at the curb like they were waiting for me. I backed out and kept going. I killed the radio because it felt like static. A car coming the other way flashed brights. I thought of flagging them, but decided no. At a bus stop, a lone guy scrolled his phone. I didn't stop. At the next main intersection, the light flipped yellow. I took it, and in the mirror, the sedan punched through the red to stay with me. I sped up a little, hoping I was wrong. The sedan matched me. Should I call the police? What do I even say? A car is behind me. Then I remembered the advice. Never go home, go somewhere public. A 24-hour gas station was coming up. I thought about pulling in. But there was something better. Our police station 2 blocks over. I pass it every morning. I eased into the left lane like I was setting up for the gas station, then signaled right at the last second and cut to the frontage road toward the station. The sedan hesitated, then swung across late, clipping the rumble strips. That told me this was about me. My hands were slick on the wheel. I said, "Do not stop. Do not get out. Keep rolling." I grabbed my phone from the passenger seat and pulled up the emergency screen, finger hovering over the dial button. Without signaling, I suddenly changed direction at the next light, heading toward the station. The sedan slowed but kept following, maybe 3 car lengths back. I kept my speed steady and aimed for the police building. When it came into view, I turned hard into the lot and rolled right up to the front doors. The sedan went straight past without slowing and disappeared around the corner. A duty officer stepped outside. I told him a gray Toyota Camry had tailed me from the supermarket and gave him the plate I'd memorized. He wrote it down, said they'd run it, and offered a patrol to follow me home. Inside the lobby, he radioed dispatch and asked quick basics: time, turns, where I first saw them. I added the right rear brake light looked dim, and there was a dent by the trunk lock. He said, "Good eye," and told me I'd done the right thing not going home. Another officer said a unit was a minute out. 2 minutes later, a cruiser idled behind my bumper. The older officer said, "We'll ride your tail all the way. If you see that Camry again, don't stop, not even at home. Hit the horn and we'll take it." I called my neighbor to expect me, just in case. We took the main road back and the turn by the elementary school. No sign of the Camry. The cruiser waited while I hit the garage remote and pulled in, then scanned the street and rolled off slow. I locked up and set the grocery bags down on the kitchen mat so I wouldn't drop glass. I kept my phone on the nightstand with emergency open. After lunch, a detective rang. He said the plate hid in their system. The registered owner was tied to attempted abductions in neighboring counties over the past 2 months. He laid out the pattern: follow women from grocery lots, tail to isolation, force a stop. My case fit the start of it. He likely wanted me on an empty street or in my driveway. Going straight to the station broke his script. He asked for a formal statement and said they might show me a photo lineup. I agreed. He mentioned cameras at the supermarket and asked for my receipt time. He said, "You did the 3 big things. Didn't go home, didn't stop, came to us." A week later, he called again. They'd arrested the guy in another town after he tried the same thing, and the woman dialed 911 while driving. She kept dispatch on and gave streets. Officers boxed him in at a light. They found zip ties and gloves in his trunk, not illegal alone but consistent with the attempts, and he matched descriptions. I signed my statement the next day. That night I looked over the route and marked lots with cameras I could remember. He said they'd keep my report on file and other departments were coordinating, comparing plates and routes from similar nights. Now I'm obsessive about mirrors before I even back out of a space, and I keep my phone on the seat with 911 pulled up if it's dark. I park under cameras when I can. I back into spots for a quick exit, and if a car sits behind me through more than a couple turns, I head for lights and people. Plan be damned. I used to think that sounded paranoid, but after hearing the pattern and the arrest, I replay the moment the Camry slid past the station doors and I count it as the best turn I've ever made. I used to work night security at this small natural history museum in an old 3-story mansion. Museum closed at 6 p.m., then security took over. Usually 2 of us worked, one at the front entrance, one doing hourly rounds. That particular night my partner called in sick and I was alone, which was rare. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I'd done doubles before and the building wasn't exactly wild at night, just lots of creaks and that old radiator hiss. And I stuck to the route. Entrance, basement boiler panel, 1st floor galleries, 2nd floor minerals, 3rd floor offices, then back to cameras. Around 2 a.m. while checking the 3rd floor, I heard this weird sound from the stairwell going down. It was soft at first, like a shoe slipping on stone, and then one more step, definite. And every exit was dead-bolted, and I had the keys on me, so that didn't make sense. I took the stairs to the 2nd floor to clear the landing. Slow, radio clipped at my chest, flashlight off so I wouldn't backlight myself. And when I hit the 2nd floor hall, I saw the door to the minerals exhibit sitting just barely open. I definitely remembered closing it during my previous round. Handle turned, latch clicked. I'm careful about that stuff. And there it was with the little beam of exit sign light cutting across the floor. I went in. The room holds rows of glass cases and a couple of wall safes for the pricier specimens, and everything looked normal, but I felt that push of air you get when somebody moves past you, that quick slip of a draft, and it made me stop. I walked the perimeter, checking case locks with a fingertip, scanning for a cracked panel or footprints, anything. Nothing broken, nothing shifted. The big amethyst geode still sitting where it always sits like a purple open mouth, and I told myself it was just the old ventilation doing its thing, and that I was letting the empty building get to me. I pulled the door shut, tested it twice, logged minerals secure on the round sheet, kept moving. An hour later, past 3, I was crossing the 1st floor by the taxidermy hall, and I caught a silhouette between the elk and the bear. Just a person shape where a person shouldn't be. I froze, then raised the light. A man stood there in dark clothes, back to me, completely motionless, like he was part of the display. I called out, "Sir, museum's closed," and got nothing. He turned slow. Gaunt face, long greasy hair tucked in the hood, eyes not really on me, more like through me. Dirty jeans, gray hoodie, no bag, no badge, not staff, not a visitor who got stuck in a bathroom. He didn't even look curious, just absent. And when I asked who he was and how he got inside, he stared somewhere over my shoulder like I wasn't actually the one talking. Trying to stay calm, I told him we were closed and that we needed to head to the exit together. "No big deal, man. We'll get you signed out." And I gestured with the beam so he'd see I wasn't crowding him. He didn't react, just stood planted like a coat rack. I pulled my radio and keyed dispatch. Unit 4 at 1st floor taxidermy, 1 unknown male inside, send PD. And as soon as he heard the words, he slid sideways and took off down the cross hall toward the staff door. Not running, not quite, but moving fast. I followed at a distance because you don't corner someone when you're alone, and you don't know if they're carrying. And I kept radio open so dispatch could hear my steps and my breathing. He cut into the service corridor and disappeared around the turn by the locker room. I got there in under 5 seconds and the hallway was empty. Clean empty. Like he'd evaporated. And the steel service door at the end sat locked from the inside with the deadbolt engaged the way it should be. That was impossible unless he had a key or a second body on the bolt, and nobody did, because I was the only one on duty. The corridor only leads to storage, custodial, archives, and the little loading alcove with a caged gate. That's it. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand. Our storage rooms are basically dead ends with fire doors that close heavy and loud, and I hadn't heard a door catch. I started clearing rooms one by one, wide angle first, then corners, calling it in as I went because if I went quiet, dispatch would send everyone. Cleaning supply closet, mop sink, rags, nothing. Empty locker room, benches, dented metal lockers, no feet visible, no stalls. Archive, shelving, banker boxes, the old card catalog cabinet that jams. I nudged stacks with my boot, checked under the rolling ladders. I could feel sweat running under the vest, and I kept telling myself he was just some desperate guy looking for a warm place to crash because people do that. They slip in at closing behind a tour group. It happens. And desperate doesn't always mean dangerous, but it can. And I didn't want this turning into me chasing him into a bad corner. I moved to the last door at the end, Exhibit Storage B, the one we call the graveyard, because it's where old stands and busted plexi go to die. The hasp was latched but not locked, which bugged me because I lock it out of habit, and the motion detector above the jamb has been dead for months because maintenance keeps promising batteries. I eased it open with the light low, swept across a maze of wooden platforms and mannequin bases and a couple of those black velvet rope stanchions, and I said, "Hey man, I'm not here to jam you up. Just need you to come out with your hands where I can see them, all right?" No answer. Only that faint hum from the soda machine in the hall. I stepped around a stacked set of acrylic risers, kept my back to the wall when I could, checked behind the tall crate with the fork pockets, listened for breathing, anything. My radio crackled, dispatch asking for status, and I started to answer but stopped because I saw the hoodie's cuff just barely sticking out behind 2 tilted display boards. I didn't move fast. I planted, angled the light so it didn't blind him and said, "Don't reach. Show me your hands." In the last room, among old exhibit stands, I found him crouched in a corner. I kept the light on his hands and didn't step in, just held the doorway and repeated myself. And that's how we were when backup showed up roughly 10 minutes later. 2 of our guys from the on-call list who live nearby and a patrol unit that rolled in fast. They moved past me like they'd practiced in that exact room. One guard took my place and kept the beam steady. The other worked the flank, and the officer gave the usual, "Hands where I can see them, stand up slow." And the guy did it without a word. No fight, no twitch, just unfolded and kept his eyes somewhere near the floor. The officer reached, checked his waistband, empty, checked pockets, lint and a busted lighter. "You got ID?" Silence. The officer tried again, calmer. "Name?" Nothing. We were careful because tight spaces make people do dumb things, but he just let them guide his wrists, and even when the cuffs clicked, he didn't say a thing. They walked him into the service hall, and when they angled him toward the exit, he stalled like he'd hit glue, planted his feet, went heavy. The officer took one arm, our guard took the other, and they basically had to carry him forward in short steps. I asked the second guard to help me clear the basement since if someone finds one weak point, there's usually 2. And down there we saw it. The little hopper window above the old dehumidifier had a spiderweb crack, and the outer pane was punched. On the sill, there was grit and a thread from a hoodie and a scuffed footprint on the paint, obvious as a sign. The alarm panel still showed green for that zone, which told us more than we wanted to know. So I called operations and got the night engineer, and he told me, like it was nothing, the basement motion sensors had been awaiting parts for a month. Nobody had told security the zone was blind, which hit me wrong because I was the one alone in the dark. Out front, the cops tried the soft approach again under the portico lights. "We can help you if you help us." Same tone, same script. He stared past them like he was listening to a bus schedule in his head. He wouldn't step into the cruiser on his own. They had to duck his head, fold his knees, and guide his feet. Even then he stayed limp, not resisting, just refusing to assist, which makes everything slow and awkward. I had a second to think maybe he couldn't hear, but when the officer snapped fingers near his left ear, he flinched hard enough to blink, so hearing wasn't the issue. They shut the door, logged the transport, and the whole time he never looked at me once. I finished my incident report at the desk, wrote down the window, the sensor status, the times, radio traffic, all of it. By morning, I heard he'd been released after a few hours on a trespass warning because property didn't want to press for the broken pane. Cheap glass, not worth court. And there wasn't theft or damage inside. Outreach said he was local homeless, sleeps near the Freight Line Bridge. No violent history. Nothing to hold him on except being where he shouldn't be. Maintenance boarded the window before the building opened, then swapped in laminated glass by lunch, and finally replaced the dead motion heads and put a bolt-on grate over the well. They also adjusted the route. Mandatory dual rounds indoors after midnight until further notice, and a memo from management landed in my inbox that basically said "good job" and lessons learned, plus a reminder to verify all zones at shift start, even if the panel looks normal, which I would have if anyone had told me the zone was out in the first place. For weeks after that, I jumped at every reflection on the camera monitors and every shape that read as a person when it was just a coat on a hook. And the image that stayed was him standing dead still between the elk and the bear like he was part of the set. And what bothered me most was the quiet. Not just his mouth, but the way he moved without the usual noise people make. No throat clear, no shoe squeak, just that slow drift that makes you think you missed a step somewhere. Management treated it like a solved checklist. Window replaced, sensors live, new grate, new policy, done. But I kept thinking he could have been inside for hours before I caught that silhouette, walking past the minerals room and slipping through doors right after I cleared them. And I kept replaying how it might have gone in one of those back rooms where the radio cuts out, and you have two exits, and he's between you and both. And yeah, I felt bad too because he wasn't violent. He was just cold and desperate. And all of that can be true at the same time. Which is why I pushed until they rehired a second night guard. And then I left anyway about 6 months later for a place with better lighting and actual redundancy. And now when I take my kid to a museum, I can't stop scanning the corners and the service doors and the gaps between cases for people who don't belong. Still can't walk through museums without scanning for people who don't belong.